Hey, Joel Achenbach.
Bob.
How you
Hey,
doing?
Bob. It's been a while.
It's been a while. Too long.
So, so how do you prepare for these talks? I mean, do you like eat five raw eggs? I mean, do you have a little ritual? You animal sacrifice? What do you do before
I
you,
begin
you
by
go into the
consulting
game?
my pastor
Right.
as to who the guest should be on our special New Year's show. If we could get anybody in the world to reflect on the year's events, who should we get? He names some people. I say, no way. He
All
says, well,
those
let's get
people
more
are this.
realistic. Eventually, we
Those
get down to
people,
Joel Achenbach.
those people, yeah. So bottom of the barrel. The
I wouldn't
only
go that
person
far.
look, I'm the only person you could find who would say yes to this. Let's admit it. Everyone else said, "Are you crazy? It's between Christmas and New Year's. I'm with, my family, whatever."
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
said, I said yes.
You
I
said
said
yes.
out
And
of sentimentality.
You know the
because
truth. The truth, Joel Achenbach of the Washington Post, just in case there's anyone who doesn't know, is that you were the first person I asked.
and that's only because I keep handy. I can
That
grab it
helps.
without even looking. Look, without even looking.
Would that be
Three
a book by Robert Wright?
scientists and their dogs. What a great book
Three
concept.
scientists and their dogs. The first of four books that culminated in the evolution of dog.
I've had the title wrong all these years. It's and they're gods.
Yeah, I know. It's a
Did you
common
know
confusion.
It's not. It would have been so much
Bigger
that
audience, I know, with dogs.
if
I
it
know.
had with dogs, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that would have been a much more
Increasingly,
successful. I have a great book idea. You want to hear it?
I
Don't share it. Don't tell anyone.
it's just believe me, not many people will find out if you.
All I have is the title so far.
I can provide the rest. What is it?
How to use selflessness to your advantage.
Selflessness in the sense of surely you refer to the Buddhist doctrine that the self does not exist.
No, the whole point is, if you can leverage selflessness to get ahead in life and get an angle on other people and just get ahead of them. That's what I'm saying. But you wrote a whole book about that.
No, I think that book was actually
the
written.
animal is what that's about, right?
There's actually a
How-
book. There's actually a book that came out about a year ago that was exactly that, I think, but I forget what it was called. It was about how being nice pays. But enough about us.
Really? That's all we get? We
should
get like
we-
4 minutes?
Well, we're moving on to the year in review.
Isn't it mostly about us? Or is this we got to start talking about foreign policy?
No.
Oh, what about Obama? How was Obama's year? Okay, yeah, I want to talk about that.
We are here to indulge your passions, Joel Achenbach. But first I want to make sure people appreciate who you are. Do you think there are people out there who don't appreciate who you are? I mean, the Washington
in
Post.
my house, you mean? You mean?
I mean people in the larger viewing audience
I think it's possible some people have yet to be exposed to the magic.
who don't realize that the Washington Post turns to you to cover the big stories. Ebola, the Malaysian air flight downing, right?
A rocket launch scrubbed.
I could go on and on.
Yeah,
And
kind of stuff.
that's why you're
I've worked on some big stories this year. I did Ebola. I did the missing plane. Or, worked a little bit on this and that, some science stuff that you could relate to possibly.
totally.
But yeah, so I'm, the remarkable thing is that I'm still a newspaper reporter. Apparently, they still have newspaper reporters, obsolescent though they may be.
Thanks to Jeff Bezos,
That's correct.
the current owner of your esteemed publication, about whom I assume you want to say nothing negative. Is that correct?
No, you can ask me about Jeff if you want.
What do you think? What do you think? Of Jeff? Give us your candid, unvarnished appraisal of Jeff Bezos.
You're serious?
Yes.
Well, I mean,
You for
I'll
one
tell you
welcome
this.
your new.
We are hiring. Okay.
Yeah.
We are expanding our staff.
Yeah,
Hiring people. We're growing.
and that's
Our,
good.
our web traffic is like double what it was a year ago. So
And
we're
that's
doing
good.
It's an exciting time. It's good.
And that's good.
So
So we won't get into the reason that a lot of authors are kind of a little upset with him.
we don't need to get into
Because-
that. That got resolved. Were you one of them?
I was totally no longer a Hachette author, so I had no dog in that fight in particular and said nothing. I wisely said nothing.
You were no longer a hot shit author? Is that what you said?
Hachette, the publishing house he was dealing with. Hachette.
So, no, I mean, this is, look, we live in times of disruption, technologically.
Is that the big theme of this last year, disruption?
No, I would say violence, victimization, horror, surviving.
Because this is, the kind of question, when we pay somebody all the money we're paying you to come on at the end of the year, we expect an answer to the question. This was the year of blank. And you're saying victimization?
No, let's go with survival because, even, that's being a survivor is what a lot of people are, rather than a victim. That's the better term. And I'll say it was in many ways a bad year. I don't want to want to review my notes on that, but I would say it was kind of a bad year. The economy right now is doing great. We got to acknowledge that. But the whole ISIS thing, we don't even know what to call those people. Obama calls them ISIL. Maybe it's Al Qaeda in Iraq all over again. Whatever. The point is,
by the way,
that was not a good thing from the standpoint where we sit.
No.
You had the missing plane, then the jetliner Malaysians shot down over Ukraine, and Putin doing his strongman routine, and you've got the UVA case and
the Bill Cosby case,
Ferguson, the Garner case, the kid in Cleveland that gets shot because he has a toy gun. So you have this violence in the street, a lot of outrage, justly so. You got Bill Cosby has been essentially, arraigned on as a serial rapist going back 50 years. Next thing you know, Santa Claus is going to get booked for going after the elves. Been a bad, disturbing year with a lot of morally troubling and difficult and challenging issues for people to work through.
But is it really
too much?
What's that?
I don't want to bring it down, but just.
I didn't find that
not a happy year.
I didn't find that as depressing, as I might have, I guess. My question is though, is it really that bad? Or are we just like, are we taking Twitter too seriously? Right?
Well, Twitter,
whatever
sit,
the story is, seems super intense, for the 24, 48, 72 hours that it dominates Twitter. And is that why it seems like the year of so many big stories to you? Is it just the Twitter effect?
Well, I do think that the quest for traffic and for dominance on the web,
right,
and on mobile and tablets, whatever app, that there is a kind of intensity, journalistic intensity right now that takes all big stories and makes them bigger, which actually goes against the sort of Obama doctrine of taking huge stories and making them smaller, taking, the Cuba situation, which is 55 years of hostility, and ratcheting it down a couple of notches. Obama likes to take crises and make them problems, and take problems and just make them challenges. And, he likes to bring it down a notch.
I'm in favor of that.
But the technology that you're touching on, the Twitter phenomenon surely has a way of turning the volume up on everything. And also, we live in such an interconnected world, and it's such a smaller world now, that an incident that happens in Sydney, Australia is the big story of the day.
True.
And I'm not saying that's wrong, but we all live through it. Or this horrible incident in Pakistan. Speaking of unhappy event, school children, over 100 massacred. How about that? So we, in a way, this smaller interconnected world, there's a greater sharing of the pain. Correct?
Yeah, a greater awareness of the pain, yeah. And but there's the argument that there should be. In fact, maybe I read this in the Ebola wrap-up that you did along with Lena Sun and a third author in the Washington Post.
Right, Dennis. Mm-hmm.
Noting that, as a point that I have been known to make myself for the last several decades or so, that more and more it's in our own interest to pay attention to problems abroad, kind of, because they come back to haunt us, as Ebola clearly can. Contagious disease being the example, the preeminent example of that.
We're all connected.
You might say that. Now, of course, that's a cliche.
And by the way, problems we make in the developed world, with such as climate change, can affect people in developing poor countries too.
Or such as invading countries. I'm not going to stay on this hobby horse for long, but you yourself mentioned the fact that ISIS was once known as Al-Qaeda in Iraq or whatever it was called, and you could make the case that had we not invaded Iraq, we never would have heard of ISIS. Before we invaded Iraq, it was this tiny group in Jordan with a local grievance about the Jordanian government. Iraq created this place where it could fester and grow. Now it's ISIS. But, I don't want to get into my left-wing, diatribes.
No, go for it. Go all the way.
I think I've said quite enough. I'll reserve the rest of them for later in the show. But we're still looking for like a grand summing up here. You want to go with victims?
I would say that. How about power imbalances?
I like that because that is what Ferguson. Now that's interesting. That's actually not. I don't want to sound surprised that you said something interesting. So when I said, "Hey, now that's interesting," I just meant that's really, really interesting. Not like I'm surprised that it's interesting.
I blew your mind.
You blew my gosh darn mind. And here's when you think about it: imbalances of power. Ferguson, Wright. You got your cops with guns. You got your guys without guns.
You got the Garner case. The guy is selling cigarettes illegally, and a few minutes later, he's dead.
Right.
You have the problem of this apparent epidemic of sexual assault on campuses.
Rape is always about an imbalance of power in some sense. In Bill Cosby's case, it was about an imbalance of power in another sense because he was this big, powerful guy. It took the story a long time to get out, although arguably that's a kind of imbalance that is changing due to technology. It's harder for guys to get away with this stuff. Celebrities, it's harder for celebrities to have all these skeletons in their closet now. But anyway, rape is always an imbalance of power issue. What other things happen today? Now, Sony, we haven't even talked about Sony. I'm not sure we can work that into the imbalance of power framework.
But there you have technology having a way of taking one thing and accelerating it and spinning it out and making it bigger than it might have otherwise have been. Just because, there's no question that things have changed just in the last few years since you and I started doing this blogging heads thing. When we used to have the camera, and because remember you sent me a camera in the mail, and then I kind of broke it. I probably shouldn't tell you that. I still have that camera.
Could you send that back, please?
It's broken.
Well, but the Blogging Heads Museum is now being assembled in my basement.
Okay, so remember back in the day, and we had all these software moves we had to do, and then I would screw it up, and then the whole thing would be lost. And the best Blogging Heads thing we ever did, I think, we got lost into the void, and it turned out just to be like an hour of conversation that only you and I know about.
We lived it in the moment, and that's the main thing. But you're right, Blogging Heads was cutting edge. Now it's a relic of a simpler time.
Known but to God is the phrase we use there. But now you're somehow allegedly recording this just on your end.
Trust me. I'm asking you to trust me.
Okay, I had to think about it for a second. But so with the Sony case, and I have to admit I haven't followed closely the Sony case other than that, North Koreans hacked Sony, and then everyone in Hollywood reads all the emails. I mean, how does that happen?
Well, first of all, there is still doubt as to whether North Korea did it. In fact, today they were taping this. There's a piece in the New York Times about the doubts, but that makes the point. It could have, in principle, been just a bunch of hackers. So to bring us back to this imbalance of power thing, we do live in an age where previously powerful people like several nerds can wreak major havoc at a powerful institution like Sony. This is kind of Julian Assange all over again at the corporate level. And that is one of the main things going on here is that
the disruption is democratic in a sense, small d democratic.
In a sense.
Okay? The great leveling. Okay, so you know, which is obviously bad news for those of us who want to be paid for gassing on like this. You know, blah 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 blah. You know, we want. I mean, and remind me, how much are you paying me to do this?
We can talk about that after. We can talk about that later.
Is it a big number or?
Well, I mean, the reason I didn't want to put it in an email is because, you know, with the Sony thing, you realize that all these confidential things are vulnerable, so I didn't want to do it then.
There could be jealousy.
The reason I don't want to do it now is because the news is not good, frankly. But
Mickey Kaus could get jealous if he heard.
Yeah, I don't want to get into a thing playing you and him, you know, a bidding war.
No. Just so long as my number is the top number, I'm happy with it.
Let me just say it's not the bottom number, okay?
Okay.
Let me just guarantee you of that.
Okay.
Where
were we?
Where were we? We were.
Are you freezing up?
What'd you say?
Are you freezing up on me?
You froze up briefly. I can't believe that I would do that, but you froze up briefly. But
are you saying that your bandwidth is better than my bandwidth?
My bandwidth is super robust. Yeah. Where is my bandwidth? Yeah.
Not gonna touch that one. Yeah.
Oh yeah. You know what? I could be freezing. Well, never mind, because I'm not actually connected by Ethernet, so it's possible that I could freeze. But anyway, we're still streaming.
Yeah,
anyway, this is a serious thing. This imbalance of power thing. All this technology is redistributing power. You know, Arab Spring and blah blah blah. But it's happening so fast that we're having trouble figuring out and coping with it. Even if the redistributions are net positive in the sense of being small d democratic, they are, to use a phrase like that we've never heard before, disruptive.
And the most disruptive technologies right now are ones that you and I don't even know about. So I'm reading the Michael Lewis book, Flash Boys, which is all about high frequency trading, and these guys get in there and figure out how to shave a couple of microseconds off of a trade and how to get out in front of a trade so that right before the trade arrives at its destination, they jump in front and they skim off a little bit of money, and it's all like speed of light stuff. It's amazing. But what's interesting is while this is happening, the people running Wall Street don't even realize that it's happening on the ground floor, because it's all a bunch of Russian guys.
Not to mention all the suckers like us that have mutual funds and get beat to the punch by these several privileged people.
Right.
So this is an imbalance of power that needs leveling, I would say.
Yeah, and then I think what's another example of technological change? So I just saw The Imitation Game, which is the Benedict Cumberbatch movie about Alan Turing and breaking the
haven't seen it, but I know the Alan Turing story intimately.
So, two things are happening there. Alan Turing is trying to win the war by breaking this allegedly unbreakable code, but he is also part of this effort to create computers as we use them today. And so it's in that second part of it is happening, behind the scenes. People don't even really realize how revolutionary this force is. I'm not sure. You go back to Ada Lovelace in the 19th century, and now I'm quoting Walter Isaacson's book, The Innovators. People predicted that you could have some universal computing machine. And Turing, one of his big contributions, I think it was 1937, was on computable numbers, how you could solve almost any problem with a computer. So it's just fascinating to see how, because of the urgency of the war, it gives an extra oomph to the construction of these sort of prototype computers. Now the bombe, B-O-M-B-E, that Turing was working on in the movie was not actually a computer. And I get this from Walter himself, who says that no, because a computer has to be digital, electronic, and reprogrammable. And this was digital, but it was electromechanical, and it was not reprogrammable. So the bomb is not actually a computer. It's like semi-computer. Anyway, but
that's what they called this thing, the BOMBE?
The bomb.
It's kind of confusing because they were also developing like an atomic bomb.
And I have a segue on that because another big oomph that gave the computer revolution a shove forward was what von Neumann was working on up in your neck.
Right here where I live?
Right where you live. He probably lived down the street from you.
He was working on both the computer. He developed the famous von Neumann architecture of the computer and, of course, the BOMB.
Right. So the BOMB, yes. B. No E. Yeah. And so figuring out what happens when you have an atomic explosion, or later sort of a hydrogen bomb where you have the implosion and the fusion, all that, they needed computers to figure that stuff out. And so that was so the urgency of the war effort helped contribute to the energy that went into the development of computers. But I'm going to go back to the movie The Imitation Game. The problem with that movie that I had sitting nerd-like in the back of the room, having read Walter's book, was that the movie would leave most viewers the impression that Turing invented the computer and that the thing you saw on the screen was a computer. And in fact, what Walter's book tells us is that no one person invented the computer. In fact, this was a highly distributed innovation that was done by many, many different teams of people, a few lone inventors and tinkerers here and there, like this guy, John Atanasio at Ohio State, but a few other, but essentially no one person did it, and that creativity and innovation and the great leaps forward happen through collaboration. That's one of the points of Walter's book, which you get some of that in The Imitation Game, but maybe not enough.
This is almost always the case with innovation, and yet it's almost always in the interest of people who write about it to act as if it's otherwise, so that they can heighten the drama and shine the light on a given person.
To me, yeah, they simplify it for reasons of narrative, and it's sort of, dare one say, it's how Hollywood works. It's Hollywood. It's a story.
It's Hollywood, which brings us back to Sony. You want to hear another Bob Hobby horse on Sony?
Yeah, go for it.
I would just point out, there's all this stuff about how, we're going to retaliate at a time and place of our choosing, even though, give the information on the record that John Q. Citizen has access to doesn't come anywhere near establishing that North Korea did it. And we have reason to doubt our government's word on these things ever since the Iraq War. But anyway.
Can I stop you?
Yeah.
This is the second time now.
Yeah.
That you've tried to
because I'm sorry
interference for North Korea, and I'm just, if it happens a third time,
you're gonna 911
or what's happened? Who do you work for, Bob? I mean, that's just before.
It's long. Many people have asked who funds Blogging Heads TV.
Yes,
and why do we have so many plump Koreans on? And I think you've really unraveled the thing here, Joel.
Okay, so.
But if I might continue. On that one point, all I'm saying is if you're going to really retaliate, you better know what you're talking about for us to... And the government is claiming to have this secret information that would make the case. And I don't really think they're lying to us. I just doubt the competence, and so I the case, it's almost a consensus among serious tech people, Joel, that the case has not been made based on the publicly available evidence. That's not like crazy talk. That's what
serious tech people say that.
As we record this on December 29th or whatever, there's a piece in today's New York Times about this fact, making
Is it about
this point.
Did the serious tech people say it?
Yeah, it quotes a number of serious tech people.
The serious tech people. Okay.
They are the gods of our age, Joel. You cannot doubt serious tech people. You doubt the government, not serious tech people. They are the gods of our age. But I digress.
Tell me more about North Korea.
I just want to say this one thing that goes beyond the question of who did this. And I grant, maybe 90% chance North Korea did it. That's not enough to retaliate for. I'm sorry. It's like It's like reasonable doubt in the judicial process.
What,
Anyway.
no, wait. What is the standard of doubt apply when it comes to retaliating against North Korea?
If it's retaliation,
99.99%. I'm gonna guess most American people would go for somewhere in the high 60s. You know,
really.
Well, we're gonna knock out their internet for a day or something. That doesn't seem so. I mean, we're not invading.
Well, it depends on what the retaliation is. But you have segued so beautifully into my other hobby horse on this. So we're like complaining about that whoever did it. Maybe it's North Korea. Probably is North Korea. Let me emphasize that. But do you know? I mean, we're getting so we're up on our high horse about this. Do you know who committed what in the entire history of humankind, so far as I know, is the cyber attack that was closest to a true act of war? A cyber attack that was, I think, a true act of war in a fairly literal sense. Do you know which government did that, Joel?
I'm going to guess it wasn't North Korea.
You're right, buddy. We are on the same wavelength here. It's almost amazing. It's almost uncanny the way our minds are syncing here, Joel. And do you want to guess which government it was?
What's that in your hand? Okay.
I don't know.
Drop it.
We're talking about technology, and I just wanted to point out I've got these amazing things called earbuds.
Okay.
So I know of what I speak. When I talk technology, I know my technology.
Was it the United States that did the bad thing?
Uncanny, because that's just the phrase that was in my head, United States. The Stuxnet attack that the United States did in concert with Israel to Iran was actually blew stuff up, loosely speaking. It made these centrifuges spin out of control. So it was it had a kinetic effect, as they say. And kinetic effects, disabling, like if you sent a bomb in that did the exact same thing, disabled the exact same centrifuges, there would be no doubt that's an act of war. So we do that kind of stuff. And then somebody does this to us, North Korea, we act like it's totally unprecedented and something and I'm just saying, and this is a serious point, as we move into this age where cyber warfare is such a threat, it is in our interest to establish both the norm of non-aggression and ideally, if it's enforceable, the tenet of international law against cyber aggression, rather than being on the cutting edge of committing cyber aggression, which our country is.
Just for the record, You're upset about the accusations against North Korea, and you're upset about what we did to Iran.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I guess
I'm not upset. I'm not upset about the accusations.
Never really worked for you.
I'm not upset about the accusations against North Korea. I am just saying that the U.S. government hasn't made the case, and if it's really going to retaliate, I want to see the case made. Sorry.
Okay, I know. I agree. No, I'm with you on that. But maybe we should wind back to the whole year in review. Don't you agree that it was kind of a bad year?
That's what I don't know. There was this piece in Slate by Steve Pinker and somebody else. Did you see this? We should have looked at this. I haven't read it, but it's about how actually things aren't so bad. Look at this long-term decline in violent deaths as a proportion of the population and stuff like that. It's Steve Pinker's kind of basic thing. He wrote a book about it, I gather. That had 37,000 Facebook likes last time I looked, which shows one of two things. Either they're onto something, or there's a huge thirst in America for that kind of news, whether or not they're onto something, for that kind of take on things.
Okay, so, I guess I'm not saying that statistically there's more violence.
Yeah.
I'm saying that the year as we experienced it was marked by a number of disturbing events. And so, the young man who was killed in Ferguson, that's not so much a statistical event as it's a personal tragedy that a lot of people felt. Hands up, don't shoot. I mean, it felt like that young man should still be alive. However, you decide to litigate what exactly happened on the street there. Why is it so? This is not a statistical thing. Yes, the violent crime is way down in this country in most zip codes, anywhere in the country. And so many long-term indices of, health, happiness, look positive, but that doesn't really tell you what the year was like. I mean, to me, it was a year in which many of the biggest stories of this year were the things that no one could have budgeted in their news meetings. So if you think about what they could budget the midterm elections, right? We knew that the first Tuesday in November there was going to be a big election. That was never a huge story. I'm not trying to take anything away from the people who won those contests, or clearly it was big news that the Republicans took control of the Senate.
Yeah.
Clearly it was big news that the Democrats got whomped and Obama was sort of handed his hat. I mean, that's definitely news, but that's not what people were talking about. They were talking about Ferguson. They were talking about Bill Cosby, talking about that UVA case, the fiasco. They were talking about the Garner case in New York, and they were talking about Ebola. For a long time, people were very concerned that Ebola might be on the loose. Back in March, I was working on that missing plane story. Everyone was really fascinated with the case of the missing plane. How could a commercial jetliner just vanish? And by the way, we still don't really know.
What is your theory? You covered that, and you did a wrap up piece about the theories. If you had to bet, what would you say? The North Koreans?
I would have to say it had to have been a intentional diversion for reasons that we don't know. Because where it happened, this is Malaysian Air Flight 370. It happened right when it left the Malaysia airspace, and that was as it was sort of on the way to Vietnam, and somehow the transponder got turned off, and all the information going back got turned off, and it made a bank to the left and started flying west, and followed sort of the coordinates of the flight pattern, and for whatever reason then turned south into the Indian Ocean based on the satellite analysis, which is not airtight, but that's the best scenario. Is that for some reason a person decided to fly the plane into the middle of the ocean. Now,
the pilot may have been under duress, may not have been under duress, but it's too much to think that.
But it just accidentally, you wouldn't expect that to happen.
That the transponder just goes kaput right before they take this sharp turn off their flight path. That's too much to think is a coincidence, right?
Yeah, and so now you're into, why do people do what they do? Human psychology, and the answer is people do strange things, but we don't know if it was an intruder in the cockpit or what. So that's not an answer. That's not going to satisfy anyone. Oh gosh, Joel thinks that it was a intentional diversion, but that makes more sense obviously than just an accident, like lithium batteries catch on fire in the cargo hold. I don't see it playing out the way it did.
That story was interesting because there was deep fascination with it. It dominated the news, and yet it never had real stakes. For the people doing the watching. It wasn't like Ebola where they thought, well, maybe this will come to my neighborhood, or like UVA where maybe my daughter will get raped, or like Ferguson where maybe this will lead to full scale there will be riots and so on, and it touches on fundamental issues of justice that are lived out, or injustice that are lived out every day, and so on. It wasn't like that. It was like watching a movie. It was just a whodunit, and because you knew it was
it was a compelling whodunit.
Yeah, that was all.
Because people all said is, how can in this day and age where there's satellites everywhere, how can a plane disappear? And part of the answer is that, in fact, it's mostly an ocean planet.
Yeah.
It's not a terrestrial, planet of continents. So 70% of the world is covered with water. And most of those places, there are no satellites sitting there staring at open ocean, except the ones that are up at 22,000 miles up, and they've got the wide-angle view. They can't see a plane. The spy satellites, of which there are many, are looking down a straw, and they're particularly looking at troop movements on the Russian border. They're not following every plane. And the best they could say is, we didn't see an explosion. We would have, we can see if a plane were to blow up, we would see that because we watch for the signal, the infrared signal, because of our nuclear alert. You want to, if a rocket launches somewhere, you want to sort of know that's happening. But so it's not like the planet is in fact surveyed constantly in real time at the fine grain level from space. So I think part of it was just how could it be possible for this to happen?
And it did. And one theory was kind of like, 9/11. In the wake of 9/11, we're especially attentive to stories that could involve any sort of intentional diversion of an aircraft. I think that's part of it. But still, by and large, you could almost say it's good news that a story like that dominates our consciousness for so long, because it must have meant that at least at that particular time, there were not a lot of truly, there were not a lot of worse stories going on.
There was all these interesting scenarios in which maybe the plane had been hijacked for use in another 9/11 kind of situation. And so, we had people talking about, how many old airstrips are left from World War II in the jungle, and could someone be operating a remote jungle airstrip?
I really liked that theory for a while. That theory had me going for a while. I liked it. And I suppose it hasn't been totally foreclosed. It's an
interesting geography lesson for those of us who are not, razor sharp when it comes to the geography of Malaysia, which is part of the Asian continent. Did you know? It's a peninsula. Yeah. You didn't know.
Geography's not my thing.
Yeah. I'm actually pretty good on geography.
This is why we turn to you. Okay, so there were all these. So you're saying the big stories were surprises, first of all.
And that's what news is. I mean, news is not the thing you budget. Although you work at a newspaper, obviously we try to say, well, there's a big election coming up in November. How are we going to staff it? How are we going to write the stories about the people running for office? But Ebola, no one saw that coming. That blew up, interestingly enough, in July and became a big story in the U.S. Do you know when? Do you know why? Do you remember?
The exact thing that made it a big story in the U.S.? It's all blurring together. Somebody in Dallas did something? No? What?
It's when two American doctors, actually an American doctor and an American missionary, became sick in Liberia and were evacuated back to Atlanta. So it had been a story prior to that, but that's what got the attention of people in the U.S. That's when Donald Trump said, no, don't evacuate them back, keep them over there. And you had people like Tom Frieden of the CDC saying, we got this, it's okay. You can bring them back, and we have the facilities to take care of this. But there was a of hysteria. And I will say it was not America's finest hour. It was not like a moment of profiles and courage when a lot of people lost their minds over Ebola. And you had, Chris Christie quarantining Casey Hickox in New Jersey. You had, a lot of people beating up on Frieden because he said, we can stop Ebola in its tracks. And then these two nurses in Dallas got sick from taking care of a man there. And, Frieden was right. It was, it wasn't going to go rampant in the U.S. because with modern medical care, this is not a death sentence. It's actually not that contagious of a disease as diseases go. It's not like influenza.
And it would have been a big mistake to follow the counsel of people like Trump, because for one thing, if all doctors know that if they go over there to treat the thing and then get it, they're stuck over there, then fewer of them are going to go over to treat it, and that could ultimately come back to haunt us and so on. So that leads to another possible big theme for the year. What about fear? What about unwarranted fear?
Fear. It's always a theme.
What's that?
Fear is always a theme for any year, but this was a big fear year, yeah.
Well, and is it excessive fear? I mean, you've got, there are people who think the ISIS thing was overblown in a way that led us to overreact. There's the Ebola thing. There's the inordinate fear of almost anything possibly related to Muslims and violence, I would say.
There's fear of North Korea.
There is
Just
fear.
to bring
Although, I don't sense a lot of actual fear, which is funny because they have nuclear weapons. If you thought they were really crazy, you probably would be fear. Fear is not what there is of North Korea right now. There isn't that.
What you're touching on, or what you would, I'm urging you to touch on, if you want to,
I'd be happy to touch on it. Just tell me, what is it I should touch on?
We're not great at risk analysis.
We are not great at risk analysis.
But who is? I mean, so we make a lot of fun.
With all due humility, I think I'm okay at it.
Really?
Yeah.
Then why are you wearing your lucky underwear?
Joel, there are some things you promised. You promised we would not share with our viewing audience.
So, no, look, the way we analyze the world is through anecdotal experience, even though risk is really something that is best left to, peer-reviewed analysis by scientists and statisticians using
or me, but go ahead.
Yeah, or you, or just the oracle. And we also, we have confusion about correlation and causality. One thing happens and then something else happens, and we see causation when in fact there's just a coincidence. And with something like Ebola, it's a little bit of an unknown. And our friend Dick Preston wrote that great book, The Hot Zone, and people became very conscious of Ebola as a really scary virus.
And then for a while he was being derided for overplaying the threat. And then those people are no longer deriding him, I think, in light of the latest thing. But anyway, go ahead.
So Ebola is a very scary virus because the mortality rate is so high. I mean, you often hear 90% of the people who get Ebola die. Well, but guess what? The people treated in the U.S., almost all of them lived. The two who died was the first guy who came over, who was sent home. Take some Advil or whatever. Sent home.
Yeah.
Misdiagnosed.
Not what you want to do with Ebola.
So by the time he went back, he was in a full viral bomb situation. And then you had the gentleman who got sick in Africa and was evacuated, and he died in Nebraska. But most of the people who got sick and got sick with Ebola lived because it's not necessarily a death sentence. In any case, so it was scary. It was novel. It was exotic disease. A lot of people are still worried about asteroids from space going to wipe us out like the dinosaurs. Very unlikely. I mean, can't say it can't happen tomorrow, but it's statistically extremely unlikely event. Probably not something we should spend a lot of time, you and I, worrying about, just so long as we have some astronomers looking out there.
Are you curious as to what my dogs are worried about right now? I can look out the window and tell you. Oh, yeah. UPS truck.
That's scary. That's scary. But
so
it wasn't
my dogs are afraid of the UPS
like a wolf
truck.
or a bear or everything like that coming up out of Lake Carnegie.
I want to make one analytical distinction that we will just throw out there for our viewers to ruminate on between problems that you make worse by overreacting to them through excessive fear and problems you don't make worse by overreacting to them through excessive fear. So, for example, I think we devote too many resources to recalls of cars because a total of 1.3 people will die if we don't spend $7 billion on the recall. But that doesn't make the problem worse. It's a misallocation of resources in my view, but it doesn't make the problem worse. Whereas something like ISIS, and I would say Al-Qaeda before it, if you overreact to it, it can arguably make the problem worse. And then there's also the fact that the problem of you freezing up for as long as you did. Are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm here, okay. But you just went into full insane grimace mode, but I think we're back. Are we back?
Yeah, we're back. We were never gone. We were never really gone. So anyway, that's enough said about that. But there is the interesting question of when does excessive fear make the problem worse? When does it not?
Well,
we cannot answer that question. Our viewers can answer it.
I have. I mean, this is a little bit of a tenuous segue, but I'm worried a little bit that there are intelligent young people who despair about our future. And you're nodding, so you're agreeing with me on this so far?
Well, you know, this may or may not be related. It's maybe not related, but it's not. But I want to stick it in. It just this morning occurred to me that there are so many, over the past couple of decades, there have come to be more and more kind of mass entertainment things that are fundamentally absurdist in their outlook, like The Simpsons or what is it, Family Guy or whatever, that are really kind of
South Park,
subversive in their examination of just everyday life. And it's like I find them funny and everything, but it just occurred to me that there must be some shift of sensibility coming along that, it's just kind of, I guess, the decline of earnestness and the growth of cynicism or something. Now, that's not the same as the growth in despair, which you're talking about. You worry about despair.
Well, I think, for example, the very real problem of climate change is something that we should address without despairing about the issue. And I noticed sometimes, like I wanted to talk about this movie, Interstellar. I saw this, the Matthew McConaughey movie.
Yeah. Should I not go to that?
Well, it's visually quite stunning, and these are talented filmmakers. It bothers me when people think that we have to escape the Earth because the Earth is doomed, and maybe we can go live on another planet somewhere. Mm-hmm. I would consider that a big loser of an idea, and because I'm kind of Earth-centric, and I like the whales and the elephants and all the bugs and the beetles and the salamanders and I like the whole biosphere thing. So yesterday, my mom and I went to the botanical garden down by the foot of the Capitol. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, the things that grow on Earth, right? You're telling me that we're gonna have a greenhouse and transfer that to Mars or something? I don't think so. I mean, maybe Elon Musk can do it, but I'm not big on the whole maybe we can have a mulligan on our planet and go live somewhere else. I don't like that idea.
Okay, but Joel, tell me this. Tell me this. Like, as we discover more and more planets in the universe, including habitable planets in principle, the question arises. I mean, unless you assume that our planet is super special and the only place where life started, you got to imagine there must have been some other places where life got going, evolution happened, intelligent life, and so on, technology. And why have we not heard from any of these planets, Joel? Have you asked yourself that? There is the argument that what kind of almost inevitably happens is that when intelligent life gets to roughly where we are, we blow the whole thing up. And that's why we haven't heard from these guys. In which case, our goal should be to not follow in their footsteps, Joel. And maybe the crucial mistake they made was not colonizing another planet.
So you're not under the misimpression that this topic is new to me, right?
No, I'm not. This is like Joel Central. I mean, this is like is like if Achenbach were a continent, this would be like the very heart of it. This kind of like half-baked. Yeah, where's your Aliens book? It's the green one, I think.
It's around here.
Your Aliens book is the bright green one, Captured by Aliens. Joel,
where
it's right there. It's right there.
Wait.
No, to the right. For God's sake, can't you plug your own book? Oh, is that it? Yeah, okay. Captured by Aliens. There it is.
Okay, but so the thing you're talking about is the technological bottleneck that David Grinspoon, among others, has talked about. That if you have intelligent life and it masters technology, at some point the technology will pose a threat to the survival of that species, and maybe to even the whole planet, but specifically to that species, because technology cuts both ways. I mean, obviously, the moment we're living through now, we see this very year, you had Stephen Hawking and a bunch of other people say, "Be careful about artificial intelligence."
Yeah,
Elon Musk said that. Okay,
Elon Musk, yeah.
Artificial intelligence is gonna possibly pose a threat to the human species. I don't think that's true. I'll go with Walter Isaacson on this, that the sort of combination of human intelligence and artificial intelligence is always going to be stronger than artificial intelligence alone. But still, there is a legitimate issue, which is that does any intelligent species that's technological like ours have to figure out a way to tame the technology and not let it run away from what we want it to be, and not to have consequence? I'm still talking. Okay. And not to have consequences that are unforeseen, such as catastrophic climate change, and that the species that last the longest and that we're most likely to hear from will be those that have somehow gotten through this kind of awkward bottleneck that we're in right now, where we've generated technology, but we're not fully in control of it, and more than that, we're not always certain that the technologies we've created are making the world better.
Right.
Like if you walk down the street in Princeton, New Jersey, on Nassau Street, everyone's walking along looking at their phone, right? Is that what kind of way to live is that? That's not good. Remember when people used to hold their head up and you could see them in the face, you see their faces? Remember that?
Right.
That was better. This is worse.
See, that's how I think AI is going to ultimately, if it takes over, it's going to take over. It's not going to be like suddenly this computer we built says, sorry, I'm in charge now. It's going to be our willful surrender, right? We're just going to slowly turn over more and more of the conduct of our lives to these things. And there will be no real point at which we've, strictly speaking, lost control. It'll just be, we'll just take more and more pharmaceuticals to feel great and blah, blah, blah. And then ultimately, next thing you know, it's the Matrix and we're lying in these like gooey cocoons. And but I think we will have programmed the machine so that they do probably a pretty good job of taking care of us. And we'll lie in these cocoons and, have dreams.
Is that okay with you?
I'm not advocating this. I'm just saying if it happens.
The way you said it made me wonder if you had kind of a little bit of, like that might be not so bad.
There are days when it would be better than the day I'm having. There are days when it wouldn't. But I'm not really passing judgment on the gooey cocoon scenario. I'm just saying if we wind up in gooey cocoons, Joel, having dreams, living in the Matrix, it won't be because one day the robot said, sorry, I'm your robot overlord. You have no choice but to welcome me. It will be because inch by inch we surrendered and it felt good all along the way and the dreams will feel fine. That's the way it's going to happen if it happens. I'm not advocating it. I won't live long enough to see it.
What would that mean for North Korea?
Well, North Korea may be the last place this happens at current.
We're gonna go move there. Actually.
North Korea will be a paradise.
A refuge.
It'll be the last refuge.
Yeah. Got that.
I would buy real estate there if you could buy real estate there. You can't, can you?
I haven't checked the listings lately. All right, Bob. Listen, I think we've got this.
You think we've about covered it? I just want to say one final thing.
I have nothing else to say.
I just want to say one final thing. We shouldn't think that the only threat to the Earth is like kind of technology run amok in the sense of global warming, blah, blah, blah. There is plain old human hatred, killing that gets out of control, and so on.
Exactly, and that's what we saw this year. So we saw a lot of very, basic hatred, bad behavior,
right?
Unhappiness run amok, and so. It's the future and the past, it's all mixed up.
It's all mixed up.
So
have we made sense of the year for people? Are they thinking, oh, now I get it?
I'm feeling serene about our conversation, although you seem slightly tortured by it.
Oh, also I kind of have a, never mind. Most of our audience now, Joel, is a podcast audience. Did you know that? So it doesn't matter what we look like.
Oh, that explains your appearance.
Was
that too cutting? I'm sorry.
Are you talking about the beard? the quasi beard, the would-be beard, the aspiring beard.
You're going Unabomber there a little bit, guy.
Yeah, well, that's long been my worldview.
Uh,
I don't mean blowing stuff up. I mean the Unabomber's thesis. The thesis in his manifesto that the world we've created with technology is in some ways ill-suited to human beings. That part, I think he was onto something there. But we digress. Was there any last-minute thing? You know, we're still a couple minutes shy of an hour. Any last-minute thing you want to throw in? Not
well, I talked about the 2 movies I saw this year, right?
Yeah.
I did that, covered that. I mentioned the book I read by Walter.
Yeah, you know, you've plugged Walter Isaacson more than, say, he's ever been plugged.
Have you ever been to his thing in the summertime at the Aspen Institute?
Exactly.
Yes.
I have been to that, but not on his dime. So are you're angling to get reinvited? Is that it?
Yeah. How to use selflessness to your advantage.
Yeah.
I'm trying to tell you, that's the whole. I'm helping Walter.
Yeah, he's president of the Aspen Institute.
Yeah, he sends out invites to things.
In addition to being author of a book that celebrates the power of individual genius, the Steve Jobs book, and a book that emphasizes that it's not about individual genius, the Innovator's book.
A corrective.
It's a corrective to the first. Yeah. It's a dialectic he's part of. It's a Hegelian dialectic. But we digress.
You just killed the conversation.
I'm sorry. That was a downer. I don't want to end on a downer.
Well, you said Hegelian dialectic, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Sorry.
Conversation killer.
Sorry.
Every time. Does it every time.
Okay, so we're done. The year of the victim, the year of the unequal distribution of power, the year of...
The year in which we were dazzled by the future even as we were mired in the enmities and hatreds of the past.
And secretly terrified by the future.
Right. And when North Korea got a bum rap.
I'm not here to stand up for North Korea. I just want to see the evidence. Thank you.
Okay.
After Iraq, I would like to see the evidence. Joel, thank you so much.
All right, Bob.
We should plug all your books. There's the River book. There's the Why Things Are books. What's the River book called?
The River book. That's gonna make people run out and buy it, isn't it?
The River book. What's it called?
Who cares?
Come on, it's a great book. It is.
The Grand Idea.
The Grand Idea is really good because you know what it is. It's you being your usual funny self, but like confining the humor to kind of a kind of a ripple, an undercurrent, and doing serious writing.
A real subtle current, yeah. And George Washington is in it, and he's a funny guy. He's always hysterical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's about the
underappreciated as a humorist.
And this Why Things Are. And then you were the first blogger at the Washington Post. There's Achenblog.
Yep.
And anything else you want to plug?
No, that's it. You got it.
Except for Walter Isaacson.
I will say that it was fun this fall working with a really great team of journalists on the Ebola coverage.
Uh-huh.
Speaking of teamwork. The Post had really good Ebola coverage in West Africa, and it was the sad thing is we lost our dear colleague Michael DeSeal, a photographer.
The photographer, yeah, I saw that.
An old friend of mine, and who did incredible work in West Africa, and that was heartbreaking for us. But I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, that was sad, and there were some great pictures that were amassed in memory of him. Okay, well, thank you, Joel, for taking the time. Happy New Year.
To you too, Bob. I'll see you up there. Maybe we'll go cycling.
Go biking with our Lord and Master.
Yeah, we should do that. Yeah. That sounds great.
Should we plug your piece about John McPhee in the Princeton Alumni Weekly, or do we think that's too obscure?
You should plug it.
Sure. We'll link to it.
You're quoted in it.
I am quoted in it. And
right?
So we should link to it, yes.
I even mentioned that you go cycling with him.
That's a well-kept secret.
Okay.
So we're at minute 59. So we will now sign off. Use the extra minute wisely in our private lives. Thank you, Joel. We are privileged and honored.
Okay. Happy New Year, Bob.
Ruby. See ya.
See you later.